Testing, testing.
Testing, testing.
Good morning, Commissioner O'Donnell. Can you hear me okay?
See him. Well, we can't hear you.
I don't believe we can hear you, Commissioner.
How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Much better, loud and clear.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for August 2nd, 2023. So we have minutes approved from the last meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Okay, I vote aye. And with that, we'll turn to the consent agenda. Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. There are 5 items on today's consent agenda. Items number 1 and 2 are updated standard offer service rates for Type 2 customers from Delmarva Power and Light Company and Potomac Electric Power Company. Items 3 and 4 are notices of name change from U.S. Gas and Electric, Inc., DBA Maryland Gas and Electric, and Energy Service Providers, Inc. Item number 5 is a notice of internal reorganization from Lingo Telecom LLC, doing business as various entities, and Bullseye Telecom, Inc.
So any questions from any of the commissioners on any of these items? Okay. All right, with that, regarding items 1 and 2, I move that we accept the tariff provisions for filing with an effective date of September 1, 2023. Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. In relation to items 3 and 4, I move that we note the filing with the name change for the 2 entities. Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye. And regarding item 5, I move that we note the applicant's internal reorganization and planned transfer of customers from Bullseye to its affiliate Lingo Telecom effective July 1, 2023, and the cancellation of Bullseye's authorization to provide telecommunications services in Maryland upon completion of the customer transfer, and grant the applicant a waiver of the customer notice requirements in Comar. Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Mr. Chair, item on the administrative agenda, items 6 and 7 are both revisions to the electric vehicle charging program riders of Delmarva Power and Light Company and the Potomac Electric Power Company.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Eric Delgado on behalf of staff. On July 5th, 2023, the Potomac Electric Power Company and the Delmarva and Light Company filed tariff revisions to their electric vehicle charging rider. The tariff revisions reflect the incentives for fleet electrification that was proposed by the Exelon Utilities and reviewed by the Public Conference PC44 EV Fleet Subgroup, which the Commission tasked with providing potential solutions for addressing the barriers to fleet electrification. On September 14th, 2022, the Commission approved the consensus fleet proposals by letter order. The approved proposals provide eligible commercial customers with fleet electrification incentives, including fleet technical assessments, fleet make-ready incentives, and fleet L2 and DC fast charger rebates. DPL will offer commercial customers with 15 technical assessments. PEPCO will offer commercial customers with 35 technical assessments. DPL will offer 30 make-ready incentives, and PEPCO will offer 70 make-ready incentives. DPL will offer 30 L2 and DC fast charger rebates, and PEPCO will offer 70 L2 and DC fast charger rebates. 25% of the make-ready incentives for each company will be provided to commercial customers located in historically disadvantaged communities. Incentives are limited to 1 per location and 2 per customer. Staff finds the proposed tariff revisions in accordance with the proposals approved by the Commission and consistent with BGE's tariff changes to their corresponding EV rider that was approved by letter order on June 21st, 2023. Staff recommends the Commission accept the proposed tariff changes for filing with an effective date of August 4th, 2023. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioner. My name's Kim Curry, and I represent Pepco and Delmarva, and I'm available for any questions.
Okay, so one question for, actually, Commissioner Sessom, you have any?
I don't.
Commissioner O'Donnell, you have any questions? All right. So one question is related to the L2 and fast charger rebates. Has staff done an analysis as to whether or not the fast chargers are required to make this program viable, or will the L2 chargers suffice?
To my knowledge, we haven't conducted such analysis.
And does Pepco have an opinion? I mean, since you're operating the program, I mean, are you finding that the fleets are mainly interested in fast chargers, or are they okay with the L2 chargers?
I have Vince Nguyen here with me, and
Oh,
I'll
okay.
call him up to the
Sure.
microphone to see
Okay.
if he can answer that question.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Vince Nguyen with Pepco Holdings. Yeah, so with the L2 versus DC fast charging, it depends on the use case. So some of the larger vehicles or instances where they need it more rapidly, they're deploying vehicles more around the clock and don't have time to sit, the DC fast chargers do come in handy.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. With that, I will, regarding items 6 and 7, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of August 4th, 2023. Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Mr. Chair, item number 8 is a request from Kiefer Funk LLC for approval of its decommissioning plan pursuant to PPRP Condition 37 in case number 9495.
Good morning, Chair Hoover and Commissioners. I'm Roger Austin, presenting this item on behalf of staff. On November 14th, 2019, the Commission issued an order granting Kiefer Funk LLC, Kiefer Funk, a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, CPCN, to construct an 11.8 megawatt solar generating station in Washington County. The Department of Natural Resources Power Plant Research Programs, PPRP, License Condition 33, which subsequently became Revised Condition 37, required Kiefer Funk to provide the Commission and PPRP with a decommissioning plan for review and approval prior to the start of construction. The plan shall address site conditions after decommissioning, and most importantly, requires Kiefer Funk to secure a funding mechanism that covers the cost of implementing the decommissioning plan. This is to ensure that the state and/or county are not responsible for decommissioning costs at the end of the project's useful life or in the event it is abandoned. Additionally, the decommissioning cost estimate and the funding mechanism are to be updated every 5 years over the life of the project to account for inflation or other necessary changes. Staff has reviewed Kiefer Funk's decommissioning plan and finds that the plan adequately addresses, as required by Condition 37, how project components will be removed and or recycled, and how the project site will be restored. Kiefer Funk has estimated the net decommissioning cost to be $901,620 and has proposed to secure this sum with a surety bond. Staff concludes that Kiefer Funk's decommissioning plan meets the requirements of Condition 37 in the CPCN for the retirement of its solar generation station. Staff recommends that the Commission approve Kiefer Funk's proposed decommissioning plan and direct the company to provide documentary evidence of having acquired a surety bond for the amount of $901,620 prior to the start of construction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Bugelmans on behalf of Kiefer Funk. We reviewed staff's bug sheet and PPRP's filing. I think all the parties are in agreement, so I'm just here to answer your questions. Thank you for your consideration.
Morning, Chairman Hoover and Commissioner Steve Tolson, Assistant Attorney General for PPRP. On July 25th, I filed a letter on behalf of PPRP noting that they did not object to the proposal and considered that the conditions that were in the decommissioning provision were sufficient to protect the public, and they also mentioned under under condition number 37 that they expected that the 5-year true-ups would provide more information as time goes on.
Okay. Any questions?
No, sir.
With that, I move that we approve Kiefer Funk's proposed decommissioning plan and direct the company to provide documentary evidence of having acquired a surety bond for the amount of $901,620 prior to the start of construction. Commissioner Sussman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, item number 9 is a request from Aligo Energy MD LLC to expand its electric supplier license to serve customers in the DPL and Potomac Edison Company service territories.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Charles Herbert on behalf of staff. Item number 9 is a request from Aligo Energy Maryland LLC to expand its electricity supplier license to serve customers in the Potomac Edison and Delmarva service territories for all customer classes. The Commission issued the company its electricity supplier license on February 13, 2013, to provide electricity supply services to customers across all classes in the BGE and PEPCO service territories. That same year, Aligo additionally began operating in the Potomac Edison and Delmarva service territories, which were beyond the scope of Aligo's license. Staff discovered Aligo's operations in the Potomac Edison and Delmarva service territories during the simultaneous discovery of a then violation by the company pertaining to maintaining an open offer on the website. Staff notified Aligo of its website and service territory noncompliance by letter on March 1st, 2023. Aligo ceased marketing in all service territories and resumed marketing in BGE and PEPCO after achieving website compliance. However, it has not resumed marketing in Potomac Edison or Delmarva service territories. CAD informed staff that as of May 8, 2023, 25 complaints had been filed against Aligo dating back to 2018, with several involving price disputes or the resulting bills based on energy usage. Staff recommends that the Commission grant the company's request to expand its electric supplier license to serve residential, commercial, and industrial customers in the Delmarva Power and Light and Potomac Edison service territories. Additionally, staff recommends that the Commission issue the company a civil penalty of at least $2,500 for unlicensed operations in PE and DPL. With that, I'm available for questioning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brian Green for Aligo Energy. We're largely in agreement with what staff just said and how they teed it up and with their recommendations. It's important, I think, to underscore, as we did in our application, that this was 100% inadvertent from the company. They thought they were licensed there. This is simply going back to the checking of the appropriate box on the application. So when you do the application, you check the box for each service territory, and they had not checked Delmarva and Potomac Edison. They apparently thought, obviously, that they had and began operating in 2017 and 18 in Potomac Edison and Delmarva, and we provided our customer count and revenue count in our application. The company at all times, since it was initially licensed, has included all of its kilowatt hours and revenues for purposes of commission assessments and for purposes of whatever taxes they have to pay. So at all times they operated and did everything they were supposed to do as if they were licensed. There was just uncertainty, I guess you could say, or a mistake within the company as to where exactly they were licensed. So we we do not oppose the $2,500 penalty. We understand that there was a mistake made, and you'll see from our customer count that it's really very on the whole, very few customers in the residential customers in the Delmarva and Potomac Edison service territory. And we're happy to answer any questions you have. With me today from Eligo is Andy Lapointe, who's the Chief Compliance Officer. So between the two of us, hopefully we can answer any questions that you all may have.
Juliana Bell, Deputy People's Counsel for the Office of People's Counsel. We did not file a letter on this today, but Natalie Novak of our office did review it, as did I. I reached out to Brian Green, and we had some correspondence by email about it as well. And ultimately, OPC has determined not to oppose staff's recommendation on this. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
Okay, sure. Any questions? Commissioner Schlesser.
Okay, I guess I'll ask Mr. Green, assuming you have the answer to this. Your client began serving customers in Delmarva and PE when?
So there was some confusion in the application on that I actually just picked up on this morning. They were licensed for BGE and Pepco in 2012. Began marketing in those service territories in 2013. The application indicates that they started in Potomac Edison and Delmarva in 2013, but then in the next page it says, I think Potomac Edison was 17, Delmarva was 18, or I might have transfixed those two dates. But the 2013, they did not start operating in those two service territories in 2013. It was 2017 and 18. If anything, that's where they got set up in the utilities billing system, which I don't understand how that happened if Eligo wasn't licensed, but apparently that's when it did happen. But they never actually began marketing to customers until 2017 and 18 in Potomac Edison and Delmarva.
And how many customers are they serving in Delmarva and PE?
So that is in the application at Exhibit 1. It is submitted confidentially. Do you mind if I mean, I have it, but we submitted it confidentially. I didn't know if do I have approval?
Yes, you do.
Okay. So in answer to data request number 12, which is included in the application that we completed, as of the end of April when the application was filed, and it would be the same today, it wouldn't have grown, it would have gotten less. There were 12 Delmarva residential customers and 456 Potomac Edison residential customers.
And do you have numbers for how many customers you're serving in the BG&E and Pepco service territories?
We do. Again, as of the date of the application filing, there were electricity in BGE 940 residential customers, Pepco residential 343.
Okay, staff, do you have numbers that reflect the company's revenues per year? In other words, you're recommending a fine of $2,500, which seems rather low. And so, had you considered basing the fine on the company's annual revenues in Maryland, in the, 4 service territories they're serving?
We had received some of that data from the company in their filing, and we weighed potentially doing that. However, this is a rare violation, and there's limited precedent for it. As Mr. Green said, it ultimately it comes down to checking boxes. The one other time this happened, the company was fined $2,500 because it's chalked up to an oversight. That said, staff still believes there should be a penalty because it is still a violation of the law.
Well, I can tell you the concern I have is that it's not that just that there were complaints lodged in Maryland, but in other jurisdictions in which your client is serving, and they were assessed a pretty hefty fine in Pennsylvania for a series of violations. So it's not that this was just a one-off, and a failure to check the box. I mean, it's if it was just a failure to check the box and nothing else, then I could understand why the effect is rather limited. But it's the failure to check some boxes and also a series of complaints, not just in Maryland but in other jurisdictions, that resulted in a fine of much more than $2,500.
Well, Commissioner, I would like to add also that the staff recommendation says a fine of at least $2,500. We would not be opposed to a larger penalty should the commission decide to levy that, but we would not be opposed to $2,500.
Well, I guess the question is, do you have data that was provided by the company that would allow us to make a determination of an appropriate fine based on the revenues, for example, or the some information that is sort of tied to what they earn in Maryland?
Yes, Commissioner, and the answer to that question is the company did supply data that would fit that description in their filing.
Okay, do you have that on you? I mean, to the extent that we felt comfortable in making a determination on the bench today, we'd have to have the data now. Do you have that?
We do, although I understand that data is confidential. I don't have the confidential version open right now. Okay. Staff hasn't discussed incorporating any of those factors for the time being. So,
Mr. Green, what's your concern about the confidentiality?
Well, with all of my clients, to have their gross revenues, which we provided in response to request number 10 in the data request on Exhibit 1 of the application, the gross revenues of a private company is always a sensitive issue, especially in a specific market. That's not otherwise publicly available information.
So in just looking at the numbers, you're supplying more customers in PE than you are as an unlicensed provider than Pepco, where you are a licensed provider. Is that correct?
That's what the numbers say. The involvement in Maryland the last several years has been light from the company, so all the numbers are low. But you're right. They're 343 residential in Pepco compared to 456 in Potomac Edison.
Okay, so 2 or 3 customers for an unlicensed supplier would give me less heartburn than 456 customers as an unlicensed supplier, even though you're licensed in a much larger service territory. I understand that I mean, lots of people don't check a box, but there are consequences to not being licensed, and there's exposure on the customer level to an entity that is unlicensed.
I agree with you on that to a point, Commissioner, respectfully. This is not a customer-facing problem. This is not an issue where the not checking of boxes led to misleading a customer or a slam, if you will, or any of the other categories. This was a company that still does its best to comply with all of the current COMARs because it thought it was licensed.
Okay. So in the jurisdictions in which you were not licensed, were there any customer complaints filed for the, I guess, 5-year period that
So staff indicated there were 25 in the last 5 years total, and we think about 10 of those were in the combined Delmarva Potomac Edison
Okay,
territory.
can you confirm that for staff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell, any questions? Or go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Green, I want to speak to the company's, Aligo's compliance officer, please.
Sure,
If you could
Mr.
put him on.
Point.
And have him restate his name because I didn't write it down.
Hello, Andy Lapointe, Chief Compliance Officer, Eligo Energy.
Say the last name again.
Lapointe, Lapointe.
Okay, Mr. Lapointe. I want to talk to you about the complaints, which are all customer facing, and it's very concerning to me the level of complaints you had, not just in Maryland but in other states, as Commissioner Suchman referred, settlement of significance in Pennsylvania, complaints elsewhere. Some of the nature of some of these complaints is, let's see here, misrepresentation by your supplier's agent, supplier slamming, supplier price suddenly increased, start-stop service, contract renewed without notice. These are significant consumer protection violations against this company. And it gives me great pause, even more pause than failing to check a box. You know, you could have administrative noncompliance, and I understand that, and that's not good, and we expect you to follow the regulations and the laws. But when you got bad actors in the field on behalf of your company, Maryland, it takes a very dim view of that, very dim. Do you understand Maryland's posture on this? Has your representative explained that to you?
Yes, he has. And yes, Eligo takes this very seriously to the point where I have monthly meetings with our board of directors, and we spend a considerable amount of time looking at the complaints and doing root cause analysis for the complaints. We have weekly meetings with the operations and complaint staff. And if we see any kind of root cause that is creating situations that will create complaints, then we will authorize a fix of those situations. So the situations that you've seen here have all been addressed at the highest level of the company, and I have the authority to request software changes. I can change pricing. I can do whatever is needed to make sure that these do not repeat themselves. And
well, that's all defensive in nature for your company, but it shouldn't be happening in the first place that you have to fix them.
Well, I think
would you agree?
No, I would agree absolutely. I agree absolutely. But call centers are not perfect. Representatives are not perfect, and software, despite all our efforts, are not perfect. So we are just vigilant as we can be, that if some set of circumstances causes an unfavorable customer outcome, that we address that proactively with the customer to make sure that they are made whole, which we do and have done in Maryland and elsewhere, and then make sure that these things do not happen going forward. And I think as a company, over a period of time, if you look at complaints across time, they're going down. And I think right now they are probably at their lowest point in a long time.
You know what I hear? I hear you patting yourself on the back. That doesn't alleviate my concern. It heightens it about how great we're doing in correcting this stuff, and that just concerns me. I'm not sure you really get where we're at with this, with these consumer protection complaints. And your answers have not given me a warm and fuzzy feeling that you do get it. Staff recommends that we approve their license with a fine because it'll increase competition, retail competition. And that's always a goal, but we shouldn't be doing that at the price of consumer protection. So in that regard, I disagree with staff in that, these consumer protections are put into place for a reason. They're not casual. They're not something that are niceties. We expect strict adherence, and I'm not sure I hear that from you, Mr. LaPointe. I'm sorry, I just don't hear it. I don't know what else to say except that I think I'm going to vote no on issuing you the license, just as a marker to say this is not acceptable in Maryland. And you had a lot of complaints around the various states, but Maryland seemed to be higher than most. It's almost like you think Maryland's a mark, and I want to disabuse you of that notion. We are not light on this stuff, and we will not put up with it. Do you understand that?
Yes, and I absolutely understand that any complaint is a bad thing, and we are trying to meet the standards of Maryland law. Though I would point out one thing, that states measure complaints in different ways, and a lot of the states that you're seeing on that paper that you read have pre-complaint processes that if you meet the pre-complaint standards and redress the customer, it does not show up as an official complaint. So I don't think that Maryland has a position different than any other state.
We have a pre-complaint process, and if the issue is worked out between the supplier and the customer, it's not taken down as a complaint. So I hear more excuse justification, Mr. LaPointe. I just hear it. I don't hear culpability. I don't hear contrition. I don't hear any of that from you, sir. And Mr. Chairman, I will definitely be voting no now. I was there, and then that last salvo complaining of the processes in other states as compared to Maryland. I'm not voting to support this supplier.
So let me ask staff a question. So staff's recommending that we grant the license to add these service territories for this company. So I guess I want to explore staff's reasoning and philosophy behind wanting to add what, as Commissioner O'Donnell described, is possibly a problematic retail supplier.
Yeah, and the answer to that question, Commissioner, has to do largely with the process of, or sort of the counterfactual, what happens if this authorization isn't granted. In order to comply with the order, the company would have to release its customers that it already has in Potomac Edison and Delmarva to SOS. And staff considered that to be a significant, a larger economic impact than it would be in order to, I guess, defend or block out the violations. We haven't guaranteed either that all of these complaints are violations. These are signals, but they're not. We haven't fully verified the consumer affairs documentation, and that typically requires a show cause in order to go through that entire process. So because of that, and also there's the indication to other suppliers that have this violation, the company would be worse off after having submitted this filing, or they'd be worse off than if they hadn't submitted this filing, and maybe we wouldn't have caught it, and then other suppliers may not come forward with this to the commission.
well, I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with that process and signals. And so for Mr. LaPointe, you operate in a number of different states, so I assume that you understand how to comply with the rules and regulations of those other states. So I guess I'm somewhat mystified about how you inadvertently didn't comply with the licensing rules in this state.
Yes, Chairman. So we do try and comply with the laws of every state. I wouldn't say that. I think that this happened very early in the existence of Elego Energy, before we even had a chief counsel, and I think it was an oversight, and it was. I think it was, as far as I can tell, it's unique to Maryland. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean we respect the laws of Maryland or the consumers of Maryland any less than any other state.
Commissioner Sussman.
If this is, I guess this is a question for staff, what would the remedies be to a customer that signs on with an unlicensed supplier if they fail to provide them service? In other words, I guess my question is, if you're being served by an unlicensed supplier, as a customer, do you have less protections available to you or less recourse?
I'll defer to my counsel on this question.
Commissioner Suchman, Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. Yeah, if you're operating in the state, you're a jurisdictional entity. We have jurisdiction of union, and in your hypothetical, they have not come in for authorization, so they're actually acting as an unauthorized supplier. But we would have all powers to impose penalties.
Well, but does for a supplier to come in and operate in Maryland, do they have to provide a bond? Do they have to post something else, some surety that would give a customer the ability to have a remedy if the supplier failed to provide them service?
Yeah, and thank you. That is indeed the most, I think, the most vital safeguard we offer is the bond. I think it's $250,000.
Okay, so if you are unlicensed, you wouldn't necessarily have posted the bond.
Right, and that would be a major concern. We would not have that protection because it doesn't happen often, but we can resort to the bond to provide relief. And this typically comes up with brokers, where it's a lot of states don't even know.
Right. So would you post a bond in every jurisdiction in which you provide service, or do you just post it for a single bond covering all customers in the state?
It would be a single bond.
Okay.
Yes.
So Allego has posted a bond in Maryland, and that covers both customers in PE and Delmarva and also the customers in the jurisdictions in which they serve. So if a customer in PE were not to obtain service for whatever reason and wanted to seek a remedy, they're not constrained because they're being served by an entity that's not licensed.
That's correct. The bond is there. The bond, even if you're in multiple service territories, it is the same bond. I don't believe that's a factor in determining the amount of the bond. We have I think it's a financial integrity test. Most suppliers don't satisfy that test, so that triggers the need for the bond. But the amount of the bond is not based at all on the number of service territories.
Okay. And then staff, and this, Mr. Albert, you can answer. In your recommendation that we approve the extension of their service territories to PE and Delmarva, did you take into account the behaviors that they were penalized for in Pennsylvania? We were assessed the $188,000. Did that go into your calculus of why you are making the recommendation?
Yes, and again, it was a 2021 enforcement proceeding. I guess what weighed with us, another factor is we did check with other states more recently, 2022, bumping into 2023 complaint data, and we just got the sense that overall it was a satisfactory complaint record. we appreciate Commissioner O'Donnell's point that, yeah, what happened in Pennsylvania was just a couple of years ago, and it did involve serious abuse leading to a hefty penalty. But we felt overall comfortable with this company continuing to act in the state. As you say, we have the protection of the bond and continuing monitoring of their behavior.
Yeah, I mean, 2021 doesn't seem a really long time ago. It seems like 2 years ago. So it doesn't, as Commissioner O'Donnell is talking about warm and fuzzy. I'm also not feeling warm and fuzzy about their behavior, and the fact that they're not licensed is just one more indicator that this may be a problem entity, and 456 PE customers is not a small number. And that's not a small number for an entity that's not licensed, and should be, and knows that it should be.
So let me ask staff, if we do not approve this, what happens?
Well, they would have to, and I think they already have ended the service on the two, the Delmarva and the Potomac Edison. They have no authorization to continue serving those customers. So that service would have to end.
So they would go back to SOS for Delmarva and PE.
Right. They could go to another supplier. They could revert to SOS, but they certainly, if you deny this company, Eligo, would not have the authorization to be serving in those two service territories.
Well, I guess my view is, along the lines of what you've heard from the other two commissioners, is that I'm not disposed to grant this application. I'm concerned over the fact that this company did operate outside of its license restrictions. I'm concerned that, this went on for some period of time, and this claim about it being inadvertent or some sort of mistake just strikes me as being not responsible, particularly for a company that operates in a number of other states and has to, I guess is complying with their restrictions, but somehow didn't comply here. And this number of complaints that Commissioner O'Donnell alluded to also gives me a lot of concern about this. So I'm not of a mind to want to move forward with this.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask staff a quick question, and then I have a suggestion for us to at least consider as the bench. Has staff discussed starting a show cause process for this company?
Not to my knowledge, Commissioner.
Okay, because it was referenced as part of that's what we'd have to do. Mr. Chairman, instead of, we may want to consider putting this on hold for a future AM, if the majority wishes, so that staff can file with us after due and proper formal consideration whether or not a show cause process is indicated for this company, because there are a lot of other things that come along with a show cause, and we can be more specific in our ordering with regard to how we treat the customer base and how we go forward and what the remedies might or may not be. So that's my suggestion is instead of denying it outright here, let's put it to maybe consider putting it to a future AM so that we can leave staff refile with us, and we can bring it back up to consider whether or not we want a show cause process.
I actually think that makes a lot of sense, and I would also invite the company to provide additional explanation as to the issues that were raised today in a way that would give us some greater comfort that to the extent that we approve the initial application, the customers will not be put at risk.
All right, so I will move that we defer this to a future administrative meeting with the additional instruction to staff and the company to take a closer look at this fine issue and decide whether or not you want to keep this precedent of the 2,500 level or consider some other number, in, again, in view of the questions and issues that have been raised by the three of us. So with that, Commissioner Sussman?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
All right, next item.
Mr. Chair, item number 10 is an application from Aligned Data Centers Propco LLC for approval to construct 168 diesel generators.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Andrew Schlicht on the behalf of staff. On April 17th, 2023, Aligned Data Centers was approved by the State Department of Commerce as a qualified data center. This was for the Quantum Data Center campus set to be constructed in Frederick County. This qualification came as part of Senate Bill 397, passed in 2020. This bill was designed to incentivize the construction of data centers in the state. On May 12, 2023, Aligned Data Centers submitted to the Commission a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity Exemption application. This was done under Public Utility Article 7-207.1. This application requested the Commission authorize the installation of 168 diesel generators for backup power, with each generator having a nameplate capacity of 3 megawatts. They will be installed in phases as buildings are constructed at the data center campus. The first phase will include 24 generators in the first building, with further generators being installed as additional buildings are constructed. As the backup generators will be used solely for emergency purposes, energy will not be exported to the grid, nor will the backup generators participate in any demand response program. In its filing with the Commission, Aligned Data Centers provided proof of notice to local and state officials, in addition to a letter from the distribution utility stating that an operation or maintenance agreement is not necessary. Staff notes that on November 30th, 2022, the Commission approved the installation of a tap line on a Potomac Edison Company 230 kV line. This was for the construction of the new Sage substation, designed to provide power to the data center campus referenced in this application. Staff has reviewed the application and discovery responses and concluded that the Commission should approve the CPCN exemption for the construction of the 168 3-megawatt backup diesel generators. As discussed in staff comments, the capacity of the 168 generators should not be aggregated, and as authorized in PUA 7-207.1E, the Commission should waive any element of the CPCN exemption process that may require aggregation. Staff recommends the Commission approve the application, and if necessary, the Commission should waive any element of the approval process that requires aggregation of the capacity of the generators. Staff and representatives of the applicant are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Bugelmans, this time on behalf of Aligned Data Centers. I'm joined this morning by the full project team. We have with me Mr. Rick Sparkman, a Senior Director for Data Center Engineering at Aligned, Ms. Jessica Baker, a Senior Director of Technical Program Management at Aligned, Mr. Kevin Lancaster, a Construction Manager for this project at Aligned, Mr. David Simmons, Managing Consultant for Trinity, that's the air expert on this project. And then last but not least, my law partner, Mr. Michael Powell. We don't really have much to add to staff's presentation. I guess the one point I would like to make on the aggregation issue, it's our view that because these are separate 3-megawatt backup generators, that the Commission's precedent is effectively that those are reviewed separately. They're separate generating stations, each subject to their own waiver request under the Public Utilities article. If the commission finds otherwise, obviously we would support a broader waiver. But again, we think the precedent here is these are all viewed separately for purposes of the CPCN exemption request. But with that, we have the full engineering team here. We're happy to answer any questions.
So, anyone here from Power Plant?
Morning, Chairman Hoover and Commissioners. Steve Tolson, Assistant Attorney General. We have Fred Kelly, the Deputy Director of the Power Plant Research Program, is here with me today. We did not file a letter response in the docket on this matter. We're here, though, to address any issues that the Commission may direct to PPRP's way.
And is there anybody here from MDE?
Yes.
Hello, thank you. My name is Sana Sarasak. I'm the manager of the Air Quality Permits Program at the Maryland Department of the Environment, and I'm here happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, so now we got all the players. Do you want to?
Sure.
Mr. Schlesman.
So, Mr. Bugelman, so talk to me about what the point is to backup generation on the facility.
Yeah, I could speak at a high level, and then again, we have the full team that's designed this facility.
High level is good to start.
Yeah, so these are truly standby generators. They're designed to only run when there's an interruption to the electricity that powers these data centers. So effectively, there's small backup batteries that can operate for 30 or so seconds to kind of hold it over, and then these will start up again only if there's an interruption to power service at the facility. Again, these projects will not be interconnected to the Potomac Edison grid. They won't be able to export.
No, I understand.
Right, okay.
I understand. So your data center's running, and you lose power.
Yes.
You don't lose a little power, right? You lose power. The power goes out. At that point, what happens?
Hi, good morning. Rick Sparkman, Senior Director of Data Center Engineering at Align Data Centers. So when the utility power drops entirely, the first thing that happens is
the power won't drop a little bit. It'll drop entirely.
Right.
You're not anticipating a situation where 20%, I don't even understand how that could be. But
I agree. That's not a thing that really happens.
That's fine.
No, the entire
the grid goes down, you need backup power. So what happens at that point?
So the instant the power drops, our battery backup city reference will power the servers while the generators are starting up. Each of those generators has their own separate startup sequence. It comes online. Our transfer controller detects that. As soon as it knows that it's up and running, it opens the utility breaker that had no power, closes in the generator breaker, and the generator continues to power our servers.
Okay. Will one generator go up, two generators,
Every
or will
generator.
all generators?
Every generator will come
Okay.
on. Yep.
Okay. So do you envision a scenario where just one or two or three generators go up when the system goes down, or you envision a scenario where all the generators go up?
Correct. During a utility outage, every generator will come on all at the same time.
So they kind of work as a unit. They just are a lot of different pieces.
It's a lot of different units.
But I understand. But as a system operation, it operates seamlessly. All of them go up at the same time. Assuming you implement everything according to plan, all 504 megawatts of power go up at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, and that's my issue. You understand what I'm getting to. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding staff's position that these are separate entities. To me, this is a power plant on your system. It just looks a little bit different than the traditional central station plant. But it's a 500 megawatt diesel generator, and I don't understand how anybody can think of it, because it operates all at once, how you can think of it as anything other than a central station 500 megawatt diesel generator.
Well, I mean, again, these are standby rated backup generators. So These will only run when the grid is down. That's, maybe once or twice a year. If
We have
that.
no way of knowing how often you'll need that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, can you guarantee to me that at some point you'll never want to run these except for an emergency situation?
Yes, we can guarantee that these will only be run for emergency situations. That will not be used for any other purpose. It will not be used. I think maybe what you're thinking of is, maybe they could be used for peak shaving or demand response programs. That is absolutely not the intent. We can 100%.
Well, I
commit to
understand.
that.
I understand that things that the intent is to do it a certain way, but I mean, unless you can sign something with under penalty of perjury, I don't know how a company can say we will never be in a situation where we're looking at the price of power and we've sort of made an economic decision that we're going to run these generators and use the system as backup.
Well, respectfully, if that's the concern, the commission could condition its approval of the exemption request with that language. And, that's not something that's signed by the company, but it would have the full force and effect of a commission order, and there would be, something that's enforceable standing behind that commitment.
And I know you're in places around the country, and I know that in Texas, you have opted for a microgrid to help you to address emissions concerns. Have you thought about? I mean, we're at a place in Maryland where we're thinking a lot about emissions. So it just seems counterintuitive that you would propose a 504 megawatt diesel system generator, because I don't know how you think of how. I mean, I can't think of it in any other way because it will turn on all at once. Have you thought about other more environmentally responsible approaches? Because we actually have to do that. That's part of our mandate now. Is that when developers come to us asking for approval or an exemption of a certificate, part of the consideration is the environmental impact. And I can tell you that a diesel generator is about the worst choice that you can make right now, even if it's for backup. And there are lots of other choices that your company has made or your client has made in other states, and I'm not understanding why those decisions weren't made better here.
Okay. Well, again, I can answer at a high level. And
No, I think actually you can have the company come in and
Okay, we
answer
can have
the specifics of that.
Okay.
Michael Powell for Align. I'm an environmental lawyer, which is why I'm here. I just wanted to make sure that there was no confusion, that the emissions issue will be looked at. Suni, who's here from MDE, could address that. The only issue really before you at this time is whether the Commission will attempt to address those issues through the CPCN process, or whether MDE will address those issues through the air emissions.
Well, I understand that, and we haven't made a decision on that. But as part of the analysis that we have to go through, we also have to consider the environmental impact of a proposal. And I'm asking the company whether the company has considered alternative backup generators rather than choosing a technology that we're trying to move away from.
Again, go to my answer, and they may want to chime in, but we did discuss this before this hearing. The company did assess other technologies, and unfortunately, they were just not technically or economically feasible for this project.
But they were in Texas, so it was okay to go with a microgrid in Texas, but you're going to saddle Maryland ratepayers and the folks who live around that facility the environmental impacts of a diesel generator that's going to be running for days, could be running for weeks. We don't know, and you can't really guarantee me that's never going to happen. I don't understand in 2023 why you're proposing a 504 megawatt diesel generator.
On the air impacts, I don't want to call up somebody from the state.
Yeah, I actually think that you should let the client talk about it. I would like to hear Aligned talk, instead of the lawyer, I'm a lawyer too, I'd like to hear the client talk about the choices that you've made.
Certainly, and I can speak to that. I think there may be some confusion on my part, at least, with the microgrid you're referring to in Texas, because we do have a facility in Texas, in Plano, that's where our headquarters is, and it's a very, very similar situation. We have the same backup standby rated generators.
I can just tell you, I read an article, so it's on the internet. But I read an article where your company was touting the choice that they made because the environmental impacts would be less than just straight diesel generator backup. So maybe you can explain to me. I mean, somebody from your company talked to the press and said, we did it better. And I'm asking you why it is that you could do it better in Texas, but you can't do it better here.
Right, understood. The part of it I can explain to is why we're approaching this way in Maryland is partly a client requirement, where they have in their requirements to place diesel standby generators in the event of a total utility outage. We have evaluated other potential solutions.
Are you with Aligned? Or
yes.
Okay.
Aligned.
Okay.
Yes, I'm an electrical engineer, not a lawyer.
Okay. No. But you were talking about the client, so
Sorry, our client. So we Aligned. What Aligned does is we provide a big black box essentially to provide this data center. We provide the infrastructure, and then we have a client that comes in and installs the actual servers. So we are required to provide a system that meets their requirements.
Okay, and you looked at alternative generation options.
We have, yeah. We've evaluated other, like natural gas generators, for example, that require a massive amount of infrastructure
Okay,
as well.
and fuel cells. You looked at fuel cells.
Yes, we have
and you looked
fuel
at
cells.
battery.
Yep.
And you made the decision that diesel was the way to go.
It is still the most effective way to provide 3 megawatts of power on an individual lineup within that time frame, right? There's like a fuel cell can provide power, but it's not necessarily as quick. We need to be able to ramp up power at a very high rate of speed. We need to go from 0 to 3 megawatts within 20 or so seconds. A fuel cell cannot support that. They might take a much longer time to ramp up to that amount of power. Same thing with a natural gas turbine. They take a lot longer to ramp up, so they essentially have to be running constantly to be able to provide that burst of energy when it's required. Standby diesel engines are still the most effective way to provide that power when the utility fails.
I'm suggesting to you that I'm doing a little reading, which is always dangerous, but I'm suggesting to you that maybe you go back. We're looking at. There's no question that the state of Maryland has made the decision that we think it's a good idea to bring data centers here, but that doesn't obviate the commitment that the state has also made to reducing greenhouse gases, and bringing in new diesel generators is going in the wrong direction. So I am suggesting to you that, and I think this is part of our responsibility to ensure that generation choices do not interfere with the need to reduce greenhouse gases. I'm suggesting that you may want to go back and think about what others, because I know that there are other data centers that are doing much more responsible backup generator than what is being proposed here.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So along the same lines, remind me where your campus will be located for this data center for this campus?
It's in Frederick County, the former East Alco land in Frederick.
Former East Alco land in Frederick. Okay. Well, let me ask, is there a representative here from PE that can answer maybe some questions on distribution system planning?
Actually, it doesn't look like there's anyone from PE in the room.
Yeah. I could point out, Commissioner, I don't know if this is your question, there is a letter with the initial application from Potomac Edison that confirms that these will be standby generators and they won't have the ability to connect to the grid. So there is that in the record if you had a question along those lines.
Thank you, Mr. Bugelmans, but hopefully I haven't become that predictable yet. And that was not my question. So
sorry.
I'm wanting. I want to ask the utilities. 504 megawatts is a lot of demand, potential demand. It's a lot. How's that accounted for in the distribution system planning process to account for that capacity? And then once it's considered, what alternatives go into that process? That is, what other technologies, what other alternatives, which helps answer some of Commissioner Suchman's questions that I share. So all sort of frustrating, but there are other technologies out there, and it may be a requirement to invest some capital up front, but they are economically viable, especially if you dual purpose them. For instance, if you take a generating capacity that's non-emitting, say nuclear, small modular, and you site it, and it has the capacity to provide the 504 megawatts in modular fashion, but it's only going to run for that purpose a couple times. But if you dualize the purpose and you're producing hydrogen through another plant, and that's a sellable product, the economics eventually work. And I think, especially with the new nuclear technologies on the work going down the pike. And so I want to know how that all fits together. And look, we're in a new world. This is no longer, let's slam some backup diesels up, because Commissioner Suchman is exactly right. I don't think any entity could come into Maryland right now, propose a 504 megawatt diesel generator and get it approved. I don't believe that's possible. I could be wrong, but and yet here's where we are. And so there got to be more to this story than it has to take into account our new mandates with regard to environmental considerations and meeting the state's goals, such as greenhouse gas emissions reduction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, Mr. Chairman, that's really why I wanted to talk to the utility to see how they accounted for this in their thinking process when it went up for the exemption originally.
So one clarifying question, I guess this is for the company. In the event that there's an outage and you turn on your backup systems, they're going to run until power gets restored, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the nature of your business is you've got to meet that full demand. You can't modulate your demand from the data centers. I mean, my understanding of those things is they need to run at full capacity.
It depends on the process that's being run, but essentially, yes, that is correct.
So hypothetically, if we have a significant outage, caused by a winter storm, which in PE service territory becomes more problematic, ice storms and things like that, or, even hurricanes, which tend to sort of go up through that neighborhood when they're coming up the coast, these things could be running for, as was alluded to earlier, days or even a week, correct?
That is correct. The method that we're using to minimize that potential impact is the way we are connecting into Potomac Edison system. So as mentioned, we're building, there's two different substations being provided by Potomac Energy. One, the Sage substation, and one is Lime Kiln. Those are both directly adjacent to this property. And we're also building our own substation that is directly connected to their 230 kV line, fed from multiple directions. So in order for that to take place, it's not like a neighborhood winter storm that knocks down a power pole. It would require shutting down the entire 230 volt like eastern seaboard grid, which isn't something that is like we tie into the robust system so that those storm impacts are reduced to basically zero.
We're still taking a bet on Mother Nature to a certain extent, so.
100%, yes.
Yeah. And I guess, the other concern I have is that, because of climate change, the intensity of the storms have now gotten, more serious. And so, the normal storm is now, a normal storm times 5 or times 10. So again, I'm concerned about just how long your system theoretically could be running. And so the application talks about this thing being built out over years. I mean, when is this thing going to be fully built out?
Fully built out is based on our customer demand. As they ask us for more and more megawatts of server capacity, we will meet that demand. So we cannot really tell you instantly right now exactly how quickly they'll be going in.
But it could be sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, not to put the individual from MDE on the spot, but I guess we probably do have a number of questions for you regarding this, so.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I guess, and I'll start. I mean, others want to follow up, I'm sure. But so, what's your process for analyzing this situation from an air quality situation? I mean, you're the air quality regulator, so I assume this is your principal focus, though.
Right, yeah. So we've been approached by a number of proposed data centers. We actually have permitted quite a few, but they're a lot smaller than this, somewhere between 10 and 15 generators of smaller sizes. So the process would be, if a CPCN is not required, that an air quality permit to construct at a minimum would be required for these engines just due to the size. So anything over 373 kilowatts requires an air quality permit to construct, even if it's an emergency engine. And just given the number of these emergency engines and the fact that they're diesel fired, it would likely in Frederick County trigger what we call non-attainment new source review. So it would need not only an air quality permit to construct prior to installation, but also a major source new source review approval, which is a federal approval, because the major source threshold is 25 tons of oxides of nitrogen. So what we would do is we would look at what the federal requirements are for the engines. And at this time, for emergency engines, they're only required to meet tier 2 or tier 3, depending on the size of the engine and the model year. And that's not a very low I mean, it's actually fairly high emission standard. So we're sure that even in the 100 hours that they're allowed to use for testing and maintenance before emergency operation, they'd be well over the major source threshold for oxides of nitrogen. So they would trigger both the air quality permit to construct and the new source review approval. And so in a new source review approval as a major source, you have to install what's called lowest achievable emission rate, which would be controls on all of those engines. You would have to obtain emissions offsets for all of the emissions. I'm not sure, you'd have to look at our website to see exactly what NOx emissions are available in that area, but they would have to obtain offsets. And then following that, they would have to get a federal Title V operating permit, which Maryland issues, but it's a federal operating permit for major sources.
So, have they formally submitted an application?
I have not seen an application, no.
So, Mr. Bugelmans, why don't you tell me where we're at on that?
The point is that, as she indicated, that's only possible if the commission grants an exemption to the CPCN requirement. And that's sort of the dynamic here. It's either the commission, if the commission requires a CPCN, then air issues are incorporated into that permit. If an exemption is granted, there's still a review. It's just done at MDE, and then the actual siting of the facility is done entirely at the county level, whereas the CPCN would be, the commission. So there's still a review. It's just with different entities, effectively.
All right. So back to the company. What happens if you don't get the air permit? I mean, is this thing just not happen, or?
I mean, if that were to be the case, I suppose, but we will, right? We have our consultant as well, so, that models all of these engines, so we put on those controls that she was referring to ensure that all of the emissions that we put out are well under the required guidelines.
So you're at this, sitting here today, you're confident that you will get this air permit?
We're following through all the processes to achieve that, yes.
Okay. But I take it from MDE standpoint, you can't tell me that what that answer is going to be, correct?
Right. I can't tell you that application is automatically approvable. It would really be if they met all of the requirements. There wouldn't be anything stopping us from issuing that permit, but those requirements are pretty strict. And I'm not 100%, I can't say 100% for sure today whether we could issue that permit. There's also a lot of extreme opposition to data centers in Frederick County right now. We've received a number of Public Information Act requests on the plans for a variety of data centers that want to be built in that area. So, you know, it's under scrutiny by our department as well. So that application may take some time to process to ensure that it would even be something that we could actually process as a, you know, and issue the permit.
And back to Mr. Beagleman's real quick. So, process-wise, I mean, if we deny the exemption, I mean, would you then go through the CPCN process, or?
It's possible. If the commission made a determination that a CPCN was required, I mean, the project could be redesigned. As you know, Mr. Chairman, you know, projects 2 megawatt, or excuse me, generating stations 2 megawatts and smaller are exempt from the CPCN requirement by right. So it could be redesigned in certain ways potentially. And I'm just thinking about the legal possibilities. But I think that's something to think about. You know, with respect to a CPCN application, as you know, that's a holistic review, and the commission would be looking at effectively a gigantic data center development. There'd be, you know, it would be very different, I think, than what typically is looked at for CPCN applications.
So, Mr. Tolson, not to put you on the spot, but if in fact it goes through your process, what will happen?
First, let me correct the record earlier. Mr. Seaman, Sean Seaman, is here from PPRP for that. Mr. Kelly was here for the keeper.
No, I understand. So that's fine.
I want him to get his parking reimbursed, so I had to give him his credit. But if it would be, this is a first look for us, and that's why we're here today. We've had a lot of internal discussions about what it would look like to review something like this, because it as Commissioner Suchman said, I mean, in the aggregate, you've got a 504 megawatt diesel power plant that could all turn on and run at once, but it's not connected to the grid. They have the break before make feature on the setup that would prevent them from exporting out into Potomac Edison's territory. And you also, but yet they'd be well over the 70 megawatt limit of Public Utilities Article 7207.1. So it's kind of, we're here to learn from the commission.
Okay.
But if you want to address anything to Mr. Seaman, he is here.
Well, actually, so, well, all right, go ahead. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and offer your thoughts? So.
Thank you. Is there a question, or do you want me to just expand on that?
Well,
I'm
I guess,
happy to
I
do
mean,
whatever
you know, the thought is if this goes through the CPCN process, and I guess the one question, and I was going to ask MDE this, or the company, so if it goes through the CPCN process, this air permit that they need to get, would that happen, you know, as part of your process, or is that a separate thing that happens later? I mean, just sort of, I'm trying to figure out how we synchronize all the governmental processes related to this.
Yeah, I think I understand your question. What I don't do is I don't do non-CPCN work, right? So those air permits that are related to projects that don't require CPCN, MDE handles. And Sana can jump in if I'm saying something wrong, but I don't know of any differences between our evaluation of air emissions in a CPCN and not CPCN process. I think they're the same, honestly. As David Beagleman's mentioned earlier, the addition of that in a full CPCN process is, you know, the siting of the power plant.
Sure.
And some of that, maybe even the majority of that, will happen at the county level The difference is maybe something like cumulative impacts and things like that maybe the county doesn't realize in their permitting process. But what I'm trying to get back to is, and unless Sana wants to correct me, I believe that what we do in a CPCN process for air emissions, which I'm very familiar with, happens outside of that CPCN process. It just is done strictly through the MDE and not through a statewide coordinated CPCN.
So, let me turn to the other commissioners. Commissioner Sussman.
Yes, can I have the MDE person come back up again? You might as well just stay up. No, I'm kidding. I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit. You mentioned that you're getting complaints about data centers in general.
They're not necessarily complaints yet. It's more information requests about whether they're coming to the state of Maryland.
Okay.
And whether and the concern about the number of diesel generators that are affiliated.
Yeah. Okay. And that is my question. So, and I was going to ask staff for this information, but maybe you can provide this information to the commission. I'd like to get a sense of how many data centers are in place now in Maryland, and how many diesel generators have been approved, so have received air permits and are in place. And what you said earlier was that you've not seen the scope. This is the largest by far. But do you, when you look at issuing permits, do you look at them as generator specific, or do you look at it as a project specific permit?
So under the Clean Air Act, we have to look at things project specific.
Okay.
So, even though they're installing this over phases, the project itself is one whole project that we would look at.
So you would look at 504. You wouldn't look at, okay. And I guess that is a concern I have to the project. I don't want to feel like you're trying to evade our review. So I would recommend not sort of putting in place 200 under 2 megawatt generators. I mean, I think that this may be an area that we need to spend more time in, and then getting to Commissioner O'Donnell's series of questions. This also may be a huge lost opportunity for the system. If you're sitting on 500 megawatts of generation, and it's clean generation, I don't want you running 504 megawatt diesel generators, but if you're sitting on 500 megawatts of generation that's not doing anything except for maybe 10 hours a year, there's opportunities for the grid and for the state that is lost in that generation just sitting there. And so I'd like you to think a little bit about, I know that you don't want to be grid connected, and maybe there's an opportunity to still be part of the demand response program and not be grid connected. But all I'm saying to you, I understand the responsibility for maintaining the data center, but I don't think that necessarily has to interfere with that responsibility by still having this generation just sitting, clean generation, good generation that helps us to meet our climate goals and not functioning. So just throwing that out.
So let me ask the person from MD, if we deny this exemption request and it goes through the CPCN, so explain to me how your process interacts with that process, to the extent you know.
Right. So if it requires a CPCN, we would work with the Power Plant Research Program on the air quality impacts. So it would be essentially the same technical evaluation, the same requirements, and those air quality requirements would be incorporated in the CPCN.
Okay. And the product of that, because I've done these for other situations, is actually a list of conditions, recommendations, and so there is the potential to make adjustments to this project going forward as the applicant and the various state agencies work through the demands of the CPCN, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell, any questions? Any other questions, or?
No, sir, I'm good, thank you.
All right, so I move that we deny the request for an exemption and actually have this go through the CPCN process. So,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Okay, all right.